Hello and welcome to Career Talk. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO at the CCMA and host of this live show where I chat with contact centre professionals to find out about their career journeys so far. And I really hope that for those of you listening to these stories, we can really inspire you and maybe budding contact centre professionals of the future. So joining me today is Air France KLM's global, not European, global sales, service and litigation manager, Alf Rodway. Wow, that's a big title. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a big title. I don't use that title, but yes.
What title do you use?
Just general manager. Nice and simple.
General manager. But you're responsible for sales and service across the globe for Air France KLM. That's a big job. What does that mean? What do you do day in, day out?
Yeah, it's slightly changing now because, and I'm quite happy to share because I shared it on TCMA before on LinkedIn, that we're going through a transformation. But if I take the old role, if you like, as it was, effectively we are part of a bigger cluster within Signifique, and they look after the sales and service side of things, and we are part of that. So then it goes across the globe. So effectively within the Wembley operations, we have about 12 different European languages that we look after under the sales and service side, and also the customer care side. But going forward, we will relinquish that. So the sales and service will move to other platforms, and we will be solely concentrated on being a specialized and expertise centre. So the roles are slightly in transition at the moment and will be changing. And from the 1st of October, we will be a completely new and a new centre, effectively.
Wow. So how many languages do you speak?
I speak English, not very well, but yes, I'm learning French. It's very sketchy, and I can do very little Italian as well because the guys constantly want to speak to me in their languages, which is good because I get to learn. But admittedly, I don't pick it up very quickly. It's not my forte for sure.
And you know what? I think that's an important thing for people to know is that you don't need to be fluent in 12 languages to
Yes.
take responsibility for a contact center operation that delivers 12 languages. What you've got to be is good at your job.
Yes, correct. And luckily, unfortunately for us, we've attracted the right people, and we've got some great people that work with us and for us. And ultimately, I leave that specialist skill to them, and I'll stick to the plain old good old English at the moment.
Wow. So so on a day-to-day basis, so you're responsible for all those things. Talk us through an average week. I know you've just come back from traveling,
Yes.
which you've done a little bit of, which arguably you'd expect working with an airline. But tell us what does your average week look like?
Predominantly, I guess, like any kind of person who's in charge of a centre, there's lots of meetings involved with your direct reports, some stakeholders, some third parties as well. Head office quite a bit. There's a lot of projects going on at the moment within AFKL group that we'll be part of, and I will be part of some steering committees, but also part of some sign-off processes as well, so steerco, as well as myself being involved in a massive transformation project at the moment with Wembley. And constantly keeping people updated on where we are in that project. And then, of course, you've got your day-to-day stuff. So you hundreds of emails that come in, people that want you for ad hoc things. How can I grab you for this? Can you sign this off? Can I have this? Can I have that? The normal day-to-day side of things. But I guess most important at the moment is our people. They're going through another tough patch. We went through it back in 2021, and we're going through it again in the transition. So a lot of the focus on them at the moment, as well as the kind of legal side we have to do on consultations. But importantly, coffee mornings, going to team meetings, having a presence, letting them ask any questions they have, so I can try and help them, or pacify, or clarify, or answer anything that they have in mind. So predominantly, it's probably typical to most other people. And then, as you said, Lee, I'm traveling quite a bit as well. So I look after the centre in Montreal in Canada. So I was there this week, and I also then went to the US to speak to some of our market people and establishments, who again we have a contact with, just to give them an update on various things within the organisation. And then, of course, there's the wonderful world of dashboarding, People call it different things, but the wonderful world of dashboarding, where you get your targets and your numbers and how you're performing against them, and of course then there'll be the follow-up actions within regards to that of what we need to take.
Nice. I mean, that's a big job. That's a big job. And do you find, for you personally, I know the travel aside and also this restructure aside, generally, do you find as a contact center leader, do you find it easier to be in the center, being at home so you can do your dashboarding? Where do you personally find it easier to work and do your role?
I think it really depends on what you're doing at the time. My overall preference would be back in the centre. It's very convenient working from home, don't get me wrong, but I miss being able to just get out of my seat and walk 10 yards and go and speak to someone about something that I need, or vice versa back. I now go on Teams. They could be red, so you send them a message saying, are you free? You call their mobile, they don't answer because they're already on another call on Teams. So to me, in the kind of role that I do, and the people that I have most contact with on a day-to-day basis, if we're all on the office, I think that works much better. Saying that, it's a sense at times that you can just actually switch off from the office world, if like be in your little bubble here like today, and I can just get my head down and get through a lot of things I need to do in quiet time with not being disturbed. So it has its advantages and disadvantages, of course, but ultimately, if I was making a decision tomorrow, would I be back in the office? Yes, I would. And yes, I could be. It's my choice. But however, I need the other people to be there with me. Otherwise, it's actually doesn't become productive. So ultimately, we try and do our monthly meetings in the office. We will try and do regular catch-ups in the office, of course. And when we go through a deep dive of performance and analysis and any kind of project updates or future things that are going to affect the centre and our people, we will do that in the office as well.
Which makes total sense. And a moment ago, you talked about your stakeholders, and you spend time with your stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders outside of the contact centre? Who are your peers? Who do you talk to when you're representing customer contact?
Yeah, so if I start with the kind of countries that are in scope, country managers. So country managers are obviously based in the country they look after. So Mexico. So yesterday I was talking to the US, Mexico, Canada. Next week I'm on a call with the European side of the country managers as well. So a lot of country managers within their establishments, they want to know what's going on. They're getting customers that come to them and saying, okay, we've had our claim, but it's not been handled very well, or we're still entitled to this, but the centre hasn't handled it, and suddenly that will come into us to try and understand what's going on there. You then have your head office people, so a lot of project managers, performance managers, MI people, the directors that I report to, and of course then the big boss Stephanie as the vice president. So they're predominantly, if you like, the close proximity. Then you've got the wider part, which are partners. So significant blue link, it will be a lot of their products and performance managers. It could be their training department. It could also be their resource planning. We've got an issue with some resource planning, but then go wider scope. It's their partners too sometimes that we'll go to, which will be people like IGT, Teleperformance, etc. So it can vary, but predominantly that's the main kind of people that I'll deal with on a day-to-day, weekly basis.
Wow, it's fascinating, isn't it? That I mean, we always talk about the value of the contact center, but actually, in order to demonstrate that value, you've got to be talking to people that are going to benefit from what you know in the contact center.
Yes, yeah, and it will get more hectic and more busy, which is great for us, because as we transform into this kind of expert support center, the other centres and the other handling parts of the contact centres are going to rely on us a lot more. So Catherine's team is going to be very, very busy in terms of providing that support on a global basis to then enhance the experience for the customer and provide a much better service and more effective service.
So have you got examples of where you have used what you know in the contact centre to make a difference elsewhere? Is that something that you are actively doing and that you've done?
Yeah, I think as leaders like ourselves and others, no matter what kind of grade you're at and level you're at as a leader, I think it naturally just happens sometimes without even realising. You'll be in a meeting and suddenly you'll have a spark idea, or you'll take something that you've learned from a different organization and you try and impose it. I think the best one that we're currently going through at the moment is our executive complaint handling. We're just about to change that, and some of the actual process and steps being put in the framework is actually what I used to do in the bank. So it's really simple, it works, it's effective. It gives people actually a nice guided template and an update to the peers and to the stakeholders that need it, and it's something that we just haven't had within our contact center world in Air France. So that's something pretty simple, but then you can go wide scope and bigger, where when I was going through my Lean Six Sigma, we've just literally done a workplace workout, and that's identified a number of kind of process malfunctions that we need to go and address. So you can go from something really simple and small to something really big. And from the workplace workout, we've now created a 12-month project for a team to go and work on and start to improve the handling on certain areas within the North America and Latin America market. So again, that wouldn't have started unless we started a workplace workout, and that wouldn't have started unless I learned that way back when I started my career in the bank.
Wow, fascinating. You just mentioned Six Sigma. When did you do that, and why did you do it?
Gosh, so I did it in 2005,
Yeah.
no, 2004, sorry. So 20 years ago, when I was a young person. And I did it because the bank was going through a complete transition of being just RBS to RBS and NatWest. So they kind of joined forces, if people remember. And so within that, they asked for volunteers to undertake some projects. But within that, you were able to then learn aspects of Lean Six Sigma. So I never went to black belt, and it's something that I still like to do when I can find the next time. But I went to orange belt, so I had the very, very minute small projects, but that fed into the kind of people that were black belts. So and it was a key interest, and it's to this today. It still works, and that's the thing. It's 40 years on of Kaizen working, and it still works today, and we should still continue to use it today because it just works. It gives us what we need.
I love the fact that you took advantage of a volunteer opportunity. You volunteered yourself, taking advantage. Right, I want to go back to the beginning. So when you have finished school, A-levels, I'm going to assume you did A-levels because you went to university. What did you want to be? What did you finish school going, right, I want to be a...
Well, I still dreamt of being a football player, but that never happened. So that was always the childhood dream. My dad had businesses. My dad was a business owner and very successful, and he managed garages, so MOT service and repairs, and also had petrol stations with Mobil Oil Company at the time. And the original plan was to just follow my dad. I loved working in the garage. I loved getting dirty, hands full of grease, being with the boys, being T-boy, cleaning spanners, putting tools. It's very difficult. So that's really what I want to do is kind of follow my dad. And then the world kind of changed in cars. Technology came in, and you started to need computers to analyze what was wrong with cars, as opposed to actually being a mechanic. And at that point, I was at uni, and I realized I wanted to continue into business. And I thought, well, that's okay. I can take over dad's business, and away we go. But sadly, the investment needed wasn't there. I had a much older dad, and he sadly then fell ill, and everything just came at the kind of wrong time. So I kind of fell into my role in Royal Bank of Scotland because I graduated. I applied for 2 graduate jobs. One was a logistic company in Bristol, and one was RBS Group. I chose the RBS Group, and then had a very good, successful 7-8 years there before I was made redundant. So to be honest, I fell into it. I didn't go out thinking, yes, as soon as I leave, I want to go into contact center world. I want to do this. I definitely wanted to be a leader. I definitely wanted to make a difference. That's my personality. It's my natural personality kind of style. But contact center certainly wasn't there. It just happens to be there. And here I am 24 years on and still in contact center worlds.
And you know what? That makes total sense as to why you did business studies at university. Yes. And we were talking earlier that we both went to the same university, albeit at slightly different times. I was a little bit ahead of you, but and I couldn't get into the business studies course. But that makes total sense. And do you ever look back at that degree course that you did? Do you ever think, but I'm using this now at 20 years later from, and
Yep.
I actually learnt that at university.
Yes, and I don't know if you can see here, but if I just get a couple of books out. So this was a university book.
Oh, I remember that one.
And so I still refer to that sometimes when I'm looking for a different type of a model. And I still use this quite a lot as well, although it's very much a bit out of date. But they are handy reference guides just to sometimes dive into and say, okay, I remember doing something about this. Yes, I remember that model. Let's try that way as opposed to the modern day models. Again, like Lean Six Sigma, sometimes old is best, and it works. So yes, I've still got the books, I've still got the textbooks. I won't get them all out because it will bore everyone, but yes, and I've still got my university notes as well.
Wow, we could go lean into a bit of a reminisce, because I recognise both those books, because the degree I did was business IT, so it's a combination of business studies and computer studies. But that's funny. Sorry, that's just tickled me. So you went to university. You got into RBS.
Yes.
I mean, that must have been talk about land on your feet. What were you doing? What was your first job at RBS?
Yeah, so I have a lot to thank for RBS, as much as they made me redundant. It's still sore. Because the first 3 days of joining, we went on a course. All the graduates went on a course, and they taught us basic leadership. So how to do a one-to-one, how to talk to people, how to analyze things in the banking world. Various different models like the change curve to Hertzberg to Maslow to Myers-Briggs, etc. All that kind of encompassing, and it kind of helps, I think, when you're on that kind of path where they want to accelerate you very quickly, to get that in there very, very much absorbed. So my first job actually was managing a NAS team, which was new account sanctions. And every time a customer opened up a bank account, you had to provide ID, and my team used to check the ID. So if the passport was out of date, of course, we wouldn't accept it. We would send it back to the customer and we would ask for a new ID. But back then, we used to send it back to the branch, to be fair, because we have more branches than what we've got today. So that was my first team. And my boss at the time was Val Bird, and she was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant to work for. So supportive, very much as a graduate coming in, you kind of get eyes on you and you think, oh yeah, here's someone who thinks they know it all because they got a degree, but they don't know the reality. And fortunately for me, working with my dad, I already had the reality of what it's like. So that was an advantage for me. So I blended in very quickly. I settled very quickly. I moved on to the customer service manager role. And then I was fortunate to join the group security and fraud division under the transformation side of things. And that's when I learned about Lean Six Sigma and projects and business transformations and how to run them and how to work them and how to put business cases forward. And I ran a couple myself, but also became the kind of voice of the customer and tried to improve the customer journey, which again, it goes back to kind of process steps. So that's where my kind of love fell in for it really at the time.
Wow, I mean, that's so much learned in those first few years. How did those opportunities come about? Again, did you see them and go for them, or did someone spot you and go, right, I want you over here? How did those opportunities come about?
Yeah, the first one I was spotted, which is going into the customer service role, but that was probably, I'm kind of blowing my trumpet a little bit, but it's kind of part of the graduate program. So the idea was to move you into middle management very quickly. You set out to work for it. I did. The role of actually being the customer experience manager, I was approached, but I still had to go through the kind of interview process, but I pretty much knew it was mine from talking to Des, who was the line manager at the time. And that really opened my eyes up to how customers feel and what they see and what they think when they're going through a fraud process. And it was incredible. I ran focus groups with actual customers in the building, and you had some customers that were very calm, and you had some customers that were really angry that they've had fraud in the account and we weren't giving their money back because they had given out their PIN number, for example. So a real opener in terms of how customers feel when it comes to money. And money, of course, is very important because without it, we can't do the things we want to do. So yeah, that was a real big eye opener for me, and a real good, nice role to go into. And then I fell into a kind of business support manager role, supporting the kind of wider business of group security and fraud, And then, of course, we had the big crash thanks to Fred, and the rest of the say c'est la vie.
And you were made redundant. How did you, do you remember how you felt when you were made redundant?
Yeah, it was sickening, and that's why I can relate to what's happening to the guys today, and previously. It was sickening, and we were in a room. The director came down. He announced it. We were given these letters to explain the reasons why. And I went home to my wife. My first son had just been born. He was only 8 months old, and my first thing is kind of, excuse my language, but shit. I need to provide for my family here. What are we going to do? And I'd only been in the bank, I think at the time, 7 and a bit years. So redundancy wasn't that big, but it was enough to get us through for the next 6 months before I then found the next role. But for sure, it was a worrying time. It was sickening, but it helps build your character. It helps build your resilience. I didn't sit on my morals and sulk. I got back on the saddle, as they say. I applied for jobs and eventually was lucky enough to get a job with the listening company, which was then became Serco, and never really looked back since then on the career path. A couple of hiccups along the way, but really, yeah, never really looked back.
And it's hard. We and it's interesting how you say, you know, back then redundancy didn't seem as commonplace as maybe
Yes.
it is today. And therefore, when you're looking for a new job today, when you've been made redundant, it doesn't go against you as much as maybe in the past. Although with RBS, I suspect that there was quite a wide knowledge that actually there was quite a few people being made redundant from RBS at the time. But so you have had a stint at an outsourcer, albeit via the listening company into Serco. You've worked in the outsourcing world as well. What was that like? How was it different?
Brilliant fun. It took me a while to adjust, I must admit. I went from corporate to kind of commercial, and I recently judged, and someone was talking about how difficult they found it going from corporate to commercial to begin with, and I could totally relate to that. I went in and go, no, but you have to put this step in place, and you have to put that process, and I have to do a business proposal, and I have to get this sign off. And they're like, no, we don't work like that. It's just tell us what you want, and then we say yes or no. And it's like, I don't know if I can get used to this. I'm justifying why we should go and spend, say, I don't know, £10,000, and someone saying I don't even have to put it into writing. I just have to go and talk to someone about it. So a completely different world, but lots of fun. The guys, the culture, very different. I remember going through a thing called Agent Timer, where staff had to log their hours and I had to approve them. And then you'd say, the calls aren't really coming in today. We're losing money. Who would like to go home? And the hands that went up was second to none. Like, there was half the team that wanted to go home early. And you're like, how do you survive, guys, without being paid? You know, you're not getting paid for this. You're going home and being unpaid, but they loved it. So completely open, a different culture, different environment, working with clients. You had different styles. The Sky guys that I worked with were really welcoming and warming. The Debenhams, brilliant guy, Jason, loved him to bits, and Nicky, but gosh, he was hard work, and he was hard as well. Every single thing he needed to know, every single notch, nook and cranny, he wanted to know. If we weren't on target, he wanted an action plan there and then. It wasn't like, I'll get it to you next week. It was, what are you going to do now, Alf? What are your team going to do now? I want it in writing by the end of the day. So the whole environment was much more fast paced than say the banking world. Maybe the quality wasn't always as high, but you wanted to achieve more around the production side of things. So yeah, old 80-20 kind of rule that I know some businesses still have in place on telephony. But also, the fun part was there, so it wasn't so stiff, it wasn't so corporate. And if you take people like Sir Richard Branson, for example, he's kind of an epiphany of that, because that's how he's always kind of run his businesses, and look how successful he is. And you can go the opposite side, where you still have the person that will wear a suit, always wear a tie, the shoes will be polished, and still can deliver the same results in just in a different way. So again, for me, it opened up. And I guess the biggest part was people in the corporate world. I think there's a thing that they think they have it easier, and actually they don't. What they don't tend to do, though, is talk about it. And we know that men are the worst, but they don't talk about it because they're scared. in the commercial side, they will talk about it. They will say to you, last night, Alf, I got absolutely drunk and I'm not feeling it today. And back in those days, you could say, don't worry, take a couple of paracetamol, I'll see you in 2 hours and you'll be fine. Today, you can't say that. HR, anyone listening from HR now will be wanting to hit me over the head, stuff like that, because you just can't do that anymore. But what you did know, though, is people's lives, whereas not so much in the corporate world. So again, people are much more expressive in terms of the commercial side of things as they were in the corporate world. So yeah, definitely opened my eyes up to lots of different things and backgrounds. But yeah, I had a great time in the outsourcing world, and yeah, nothing but positive things to say about it. I think it's a brilliant thing.
Right, and it's really good to hear that, because before, when we were talking, you did talk about an experience that wasn't as good in your career, and I don't want to pinpoint when that was in your career, but you talked about a time where you maybe had a little bit of bullying type behaviour from a manager.
Yes.
Did you want to share a little bit more about what you can share about what that was, and also how it made you feel, and also how it was dealt with, or how you would have liked it to have been dealt with?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in the outsourcing world. I left the outsourcing world for a little bit and went, if you like, back into a slightly corporate world. And I won't name, obviously, the group and the person, but it was a customer service manager's role, and I say it was in the watch industry. And for the first 3 months, it was brilliant. They wanted new ideas. They wanted to get things set up in terms of call flows, proper dialer management that they didn't have before. They wanted to get better in terms of their handling of the complaints, because no one had been trained. That they've just come in. Here's a basic package. Here's a little bit of a script you read, and off you go. So I started to deliver actual kind of world-class customer service training that I'd seen before. And then after 3 months, the turns changed, and it became very difficult to work there, in the sense that every day I woke up thinking, I've got to go to work today and I don't want to. And we should never really feel like that. We spend about 70-80% of our lives in work, so let's enjoy it. Yes, there's tough days, don't get me wrong, and there's days where you want to kick the laptop, but overall we should be enjoying it. So it became a task. It became very mundane, and every time I walked through the door, the fear of the boss being there and then saying, here's a list of things that have to be done by close of business today, and if not, then you're going to be on a warning. And it was that type of approach, with no support, no development. You could look at the list and go, you know, nice way, boss, I can do 5 of those, but not all 10. And here's the reasons why. I'm not interested. Get it done. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And yes, we all have days where we need to do a little bit more. Sometimes we have periods of time we need to do a little bit more, but this was just impossible. And then when it wasn't done, and I'd leave maybe an hour later than what I should do, it would be, why are you going? Well, because I've got a wife at home and I've got children at home. I've also got a role to play there. And to be honest, I'm tired, and I need to go and now have that balance. And so that became more and more aggressive. And so in the end, I turned up one day, I handed in my laptop, my mobile phone, my company watch to the HR manager. I signed a piece of paper and I said goodbye, and I left and rejoined the outsourcing world again. So it's, yeah, I'm not saying it's all that person's fault. There could have been pressures from above. There could have been other factors involved. It just wasn't working as a relationship. That happens, but for sure, the best way to solve that for me and how I was and how I was at home as well in terms of suffering was just to leave and start a new career, a new job.
When you reflect back on that experience, is there anything that you think, I wish I'd done that? I wish I'd done that. And by the sounds of things, you just took yourself away, which was the absolute right thing to do for your own health. But do you ever look back and go, I wish I'd done something different? And the reason I ask that is, if there are people that are listening that might be in a similar situation, you know, that they may just walk away, but actually just leaning into your experience.
Yeah, I think if we're all honest, we always look back at things and we'll go, I wish I did this differently. Maybe I could have spoken more. Maybe I could have actually escalated to his boss, knowing for well probably that wasn't a good idea, but I didn't try it. I didn't do that. I could have offered possibly, do you know what, we're not quite getting here. Let's go for a beer. You know, that kind of, oh, let's go for a coffee. Let's go for a beer. Let's understand where this has gone wrong. It went really well to begin with, and now we're starting to struggle. And I think I just went into a mode of I just didn't see a way out, and eventually the only way out I saw was literally just go. And probably part of that was a push from home. If I'm honest, I think my wife at the time was more pushing that, and she could obviously see what it was doing to me, but also doing to us as a family. So I think, yeah, we always look back and say, maybe I could have handled that differently. Maybe I should have done this approach, or maybe I should have just stuck it through. Maybe this was a test, you know. Do this for the next kind of 2 weeks with these ever-growing lists, and maybe it will calm down. Whoever knows, but I think if you know, for people that are listening or know other people in that kind of situation, I think ultimately you've got to take the first look as yourself and what impact it's having on you. And if you can do something about it, then do something about it. If the only option out is to leave, it's not a bad thing at all. You know, I've turned out okay, but of course I was in a position where I felt comfortable to do that and was quite confident in getting another role quite quickly. There are others, of course, and particularly in today's market, it's tougher to do that. So of course you will try and stick things through. And all I'd say is that if you can't speak internally, then speak externally. Speak to your friends, speak to your family. Even go onto LinkedIn, go onto even, you know, us in the CCMA, and reach out and say, you know, Martin Tisdale's brilliant for Get Out of Rap, isn't he, with the team leaders? I've got this issue. Can anyone help? It's that type of community that bonds us together. So, you know, put it out there and say, don't be afraid to say, do you know what? I've got some challenges within work. You don't have to go into the detail. I just wondered someone's experienced this type of issue and wonder if I could just, you know, reach out and have a chat. No details given, but you'll probably come out with about 5-6 different people that say, yeah, happy to talk. And as you talk it through, yeah, this is the situation I had. This is how I handled it. This is perhaps what you could do. And we should do more of that as a contact center community.
And I love that, Alf. Thank you. And I think for me, just echoing what you said, if anybody's feeling if they're in a difficult place, then they need to get help. And that doesn't have to be in the contact center. It doesn't have to be your line manager, HR. It could be that you actually need external help from a professional, which is not me.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. And so you went back into the outsourcing world, but you also went to Bournemouth Independent Group. Now, what do they do? Because you were head of customer services and claims, so I'm guessing insurance of some description.
Yes, so that I was headhunted, but my first role there was actually in sales. So I joined the kind of sales team. They'd been struggling to be compliant. It's quite a heavily regulatory selling insurance over the phone. There's a lot of things you must say, and the guys were literally just finding the wrong balance in terms of the boss saying, I want the revenue and the sales, as well as, okay, compliance saying we need to ensure that we meet FCA and FOC, Financial Ombudsman Services and Financial Conduct Authority regulatory principles. So ultimately, my first role there was in sales and service, and then the customer service manager at the time, Cheryl, was leaving. She was about to have her first baby, but was actually going to quit and become a full-time mum, and I set up. And so I spoke to Richard and I said, I'm interested in that role. We spoke about it. I asked for a bigger scope. I thought we could expand on what it was, and hence why then I became the head of customer services. And effectively, my team had kind of 3 parts. One was telephone calls. So if you had an issue, say, with your washing machine or your mobile phone or your cooker, you would phone into my team, and my team would then start the process of claiming. If it hit flags, it went to my fraud department, and then the fraud department would contact customers and say, I understand you dropped your mobile phone down the toilet. Can you talk me through how it happened? Or your mobile phone got stolen at the bar, but you can see on Facebook that actually they've still got their mobile phone and they're still taking pictures and posting it. You know, that there are people that do that. So of course we had the fraud department, and then we had the service department with the engineers. So we would then make contact with the engineer and network and say, okay, can you please go and see Lee? This is the address. She's got a broken washing machine. We think it's the pump. Make sure you do take out a pump. And we'd work then with the various different manufacturers, so Bosch, Whirlpool, Hotpoint's part of the same group, Miele, etc., and work with the engineers to get those appliances fixed. And if not, we would then arrange for the replacements to be sent out to the customers and fitted as well. So it was kind of three things in that team. Very small, niche team, but had to be very specialised in what they do and be very quick at it as well. And the owner, Richard, was very much all about AI. So he had a massive IT team, a very small customer service team, because what he wanted is, Alf, if it's taken a person, get the computer to do it for me. So I'd have a lot of discussions with the IT guys, and particularly a guy called D, he was a brilliant guy, and say, okay, can you put this in place for me? Can you put that in place for me? So I kept them very, very busy to improve the actual process, which then of course reduces costs for the owner and increases the satisfaction of the customer, because it's just a one-touch shop, pretty much doing what they do on the website without human contact, which worked for some, but you still had some people that still wanted to talk to someone, and of course we had that option as well.
So how did you go from those kinds of conversations, that contact center service, to Air France? Because they seem quite different industries.
Yes. So I was contacted by a recruitment agency. I spoke to them and they told me about the role. And when I read the job description and what it was doing, I wanted to have a chat. So they arranged a chat with James, who might be listening. And we just got on straight away. He's a brilliant leader, James. And the connection in the interview, I say it was an interview, it was more like a chat. We spoke about different things. Obviously, he asked questions about, what did you do here, and tell me about this and all that kind of jazz. But it just ended up being just two guys having a conversation. And the first interview with him and Raf went very well, and we got on. And I think that helps. If you got that connection straight away, that's a real bonus. So I was invited back for a second interview, and I had to deliver a presentation to a bigger audience, a much tougher audience, about changing the contact center from being good to great and the impact of technology. And I did this presentation. About 25 minutes later, they said, thanks very much. And I went, I was thinking, gosh, usually your second interview, you kind of get a presentation and then you get kind of 40 minutes of the type of competency questions. So I walked out, I'm heading towards Wembley Tube Station, thinking I didn't get the job. Oh, well, I'm okay, I'm still in a job, but yeah, that's a shame. And I get a call saying they'd like to offer you the job. I literally had only got to the tube station in 5 minutes. So I no hesitation, yes. And that's how I then joined Air France. And that, again, comes back to kind of corporate commercial. Now I'm going from kind of commercial back to corporate. And I remember being in a meeting in head office, and I'd upset someone. And James spoke to me, and James is the most politest person, as you know, Lee. He's such a gentleman. And he said, Alf, just remember you're back in the corporate world. And that was my telling off. And that's all he had to say. And I knew what he meant. I knew what I'd done. But it's those kind of ways of managing people and being a leader that makes the difference, as opposed to, we're so easy to get the hammer out and knock people on the head when we don't actually need to do that all the time. So, yeah, in the first few months, I got my telling off, and I thought, yeah, I knew what I did wrong. Thanks, James. I won't do that again. And adjusting back into the corporate world again, took a little bit of time. But since then, I've thoroughly enjoyed every day. I've worked on some brilliant people. I've worked with some brilliant people. I've been fortunate enough to get to the position I am, and it's a great company to work for. We've gone through some tough times. Like other businesses, specifically COVID, we were probably one of the biggest industries that was hit. But for sure, I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Air France, and long may that continue.
I was going to say, so it does beg the question: what does the future look like? What do you want to do when you're older?
Well, we said earlier, I said I'd like to just win the lottery tonight, and I can just go on a rocking chair across the beach cliff and smoke some cigars. That'll be quite nice. But on On a serious note, I think I'm in this role for probably the next 18 months. And then I'd like to move into a kind of head office role if I can. I like to push on. Catherine, who is my kind of number two, she's developing very well and will be ready to take over the reins in 18 months' time for sure. And she's young, she's energetic, so she's definitely the, you know, if you like, the one for the future. So for me, I'd like to move into a kind of more senior role within head office and start to kind of make an impact at a much higher strategic level, as opposed to, if you like, and there's no detriment to being at centre level, but you have a greater influence, of course, when you're more in that head office type role. So that's where I'd like to go. If it happens, then great. If not, then I may start knocking on some doors and some network people and see what they've got available for me.
You know, I love it, and I so often chat to people in similar positions to you, where you're already in a very, very senior role. You've already got loads of responsibility. You've already been in loads of different types of roles, different types of organisations, and to really build up your career history. But of course, there's still lots of time ahead. So it's really lovely to share what you hope your future looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good. Do you know what? I have loads of questions for you still, and I'm only going to ask one, and then I'm going to go into my quick fire rounds.
Okay.
The question I want to ask you is, what is the best advice that you ever received that you still hold on to today, and maybe you even repeat it to others?
Do you know what I do? And I repeated it yesterday to someone. So I worked for a guy called Des in the bank. He was the kind of head of transformation. And the one thing he always said to his team is, you do not go for the person, you go for the process. So what he meant by that is, it's so easy to turn around and say it's this person's fault because they didn't tell us, or because it was under their responsibility and they just didn't realize, and yet they should have realized. We should take a back step, a few, and go, okay, well, what went wrong with the process to begin with, and why did it go wrong? And eventually you will get to an output whereby you either change the process, or it could be that that person needed some development. Of course, at some point you can develop, you coach, you may have to do the not nicety things of performance management, etc. But we're so easy to quickly blame people straight away and say, well, it's that person's fault. Let's go back. Let's look at the process first. Is that right? Is that correct? And if not, let's fix that first, because that actually might fix the next part of what we're seeing as an issue. So that will always stay with me in terms of, don't go for the person, go for the process, and then you'll get the outcome that you need to see. And then the second best advice was from my dad, and my dad always just said, it's always a learning curve, son. Everything that you do is a learning curve, whether it's good or it's bad, whether you work for good managers or bad managers, or you're going through good times or tough times. It's a learning curve, and it helps build yourself as a character. So to me, that was the two things that will always stick with me, and I will always share that. I share it with my family now, with my kids, but I also will share it with my colleagues too.
Oh, and do you know what? That second one, we're all on a learning curve. Every day's a school day.
Yes.
And you're right. Even some of those not so great experiences, you learn so much. You learn so much about yourself. You learn new skills, and you learn what you don't like as much as you do like.
Correct. Yes.
It is. It's fascinating. So I've got some quick fire questions for you. Are you ready? They're never quick fire.
Be nice. Be nice.
But we'll try. Right. So first one, given that you work for an airline, do you prefer a holiday in the sun or in the snow?
I'll go sun.
Oh, but you hesitated.
Yeah, I'd like snow too, you see, and I mean, I haven't skied for a while, but snow is really beautiful. Sun gives you opportunities to do probably a little bit more than maybe snow, but yeah, so just sun. Yeah, just sun beats it.
Interesting. Nice, quick, easy one. What's your favorite color?
Oh, green. That's easy.
Green. Yeah. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. And what do you do when you're not working? You talked about having your family. What do you do when you're not working?
Yeah, so I'm a dad to 3 kids, so that keeps me busy. And although they're growing up very quickly now, and my eldest is.
I was going to say, how old are they now, approximately?
Well, my eldest is starting driving lessons, so he's 17 and just finished his first, well, almost finished his first year at college. My daughter is turning 15, and then my youngest is turning 5. So he definitely keeps me on my toes.
Oh, I bet.
So yes, that around, I'll say forgetting family, but I actually do a lot of sport. So I recently did an Ironman in 2022. So for those that don't know, it's a triathlon. So you swim, cycle, and then run. So I do a few of those. I do enjoy running, so I'm a member of my local running club, and I go to running club on a regular basis. I do enjoy a bit of 6-a-side now. I'm a bit too old now to do 11-a-side football. So generally an active guy, but I also enjoy a good restaurant, a good wine bar. Gin is my favorite tipple, so that tends to happen after a few pints, and then I hit the gin, and then I get a little bit crazy. As well as just sitting down and just reading a book, and just putting on some headphones on, read a book, and just kind of decompose, if you like, and chill for a little bit. So a lot of different things. Yeah, a lot of different things.
Do you know what? As you were talking there, I'm thinking you've just got it absolutely made. Successful career, brilliant family. You've got your own time. I'm thinking, have you got 10 days in your week?
Yeah, it sometimes feels like it. It doesn't always work like that, but yeah, and you'll know yourself. But even just sometimes just sitting with your other half and just watching some whatever on TV with a glass of wine, and just letting the world just go past you is just as nice, just as nice.
Totally agree. Alf, thank you so much for joining me here on Career Talk and sharing your story. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've learned so much about you.
That's good to hear. I hope it was good, and I hope it was interesting for everyone else.
I'm sure it was, and inspirational. Alf, thank you so much. And for those of you that are listening, if you want to listen to others, there are more on ccma.org.uk, where I've interviewed all sorts of senior leaders and team leaders from across the contact centre industry. For now, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.